In the past, I would shy away from painting trees because for a long time they held the second place spot for most scary thing to paint, next to portraits, of course. It wasn't until I realized that trees are structured very much like flowers that painting trees became a lot less intimidating. When you think of a tree as having a stem, the trunk, and groups of petals, really the leaves, and spend a bit of time figuring out the direction each takes, then trees become a lot more accessible. I don't know what it was, like trees are big and huge and stately and yeah. But if I think of them more like flowers, they just feel a lot more friendly and doable for me. Let's give it a try. Today I'm using Arches 130-pound cold press watercolor paper, and look at this cute little format. I love it so much. I'm also using the Art for Joy's Sake watercolor palette, my 1/4-inch dagger, and the liner brush. If you don't have a dagger, a number 6 round will do just fine. You know what? Let's save that dagger for later on. I'm going to bring out my number 6 round. Let's get this started. Grab your favorite brown. It doesn't matter what brand. Use what you have, use what you love. I'm going to map out the trunk of the tree. I always start with the trunk, and I'm going to use the point of my brush here. And just kind of think about this as sketching with your brush and with paint. Look back at the reference photo. I'm going to have it for you below in case you want to use the exact photo I used. Here's a look at it up on the screen. At this point, I'm not worrying about how much paint is on my brush and how much paint is on the paper. As long as you can see it, you're fine. Now, I would suggest going a little bit lighter at this stage. You can always build up the intensity of the color once you have the structure of that trunk down. Think about the pressure, how much pressure is on your brush, how little pressure is on your brush. I'm using a medium to light pressure here all throughout, mapping out the trunk of the tree. And the trunk of the tree doesn't need to be all one continuous line either. It can be little dashes and dots and marks and scratches. All of those dashes, dots, marks, and scratches can be the beginning of texture on your trunk. I also like to think about the trunk of the tree as a vine that connects 2 leaves. That helps me understand how to build and paint and sculpt that trunk with my brush. We're going to come back to the trunk later and add more detail and depth with darker colors. Grab your dagger brush and load up with your favorite green. Stroke downwards a few times. Now, I don't have a lot of pigment or water on my brush. It's kind of a dry brush technique because I want to get the texture of those weeping leaf clusters from the very first strokes that I lay down on the page. I'm still following that reference photo, but I'm basically creating little clusters or little upside down umbrellas here, there, and everywhere to kind of mimic what I'm seeing in my inspiration photo. One umbrella may take 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 strokes for it to come alive. I'm starting now to add some other colors, a bright kind of classic grass green here to finish out some of my upside down umbrellas. And I've got a little bit more water on the brush, but not too much. A little tip here, you might want to go ahead and practice this dry brush technique on another piece of paper. Feel free to add a little bit of water to your brush, even clean water, if you want to start to blend some of the areas like I did in that very central upside down umbrella shape to get a softer finish instead of all textury finish everywhere. My tree is going to have a lot of texture, so if you're following along, yours might too. But I don't want to have all the texture everywhere or else it could get a little boring. Going back to the number 6 round with a darker brown. Now, if you only have one brown in your palette like I do, you can mix that brown with a little bit of blue or purple. You could also just load up more brown on your brush, less water, like I did. It's going to give you a darker pigment application. Now, I am just adding some darker moments where a branch meets the trunk, where the trunk kind of Y's off in the middle there, and then on the underside of the branch on the left side. Those marks not only add definition, but they add detail and start to further give us the sense of bark on the tree. Now, this painting is small too. I mean, we're talking like 3 by 4 inches here at most, so a few marks go a long way. You don't have to get too terribly detailed to get the impression of detail on a small painting. For these marks, I am holding my brush almost perpendicular to the page. You'll notice that, but remember, hold the brush in a way that's comfortable for you. It's just easier to get a really fine mark from a brush like this using the tip of the brush held perpendicular to the page. At least for me it is. With the number 6 round, I'm going in with that dark brown again and adding a few suggestions of branches starting to peek through the weeping willow clusters. I I rinsed my brush now and added a little bit of blue and a little bit of green, use what you have, and I'm gonna go in and further define those weeping clusters. I'm gonna make longer strokes now, and I have the same amount of pigment on my brush, but a little bit more water. So I'm definitely getting less texture with this next layer of strokes. Going over top of that central upside down umbrella, bringing back some of the texture with a few blue strokes, and then back into the trunk, I mixed a little bit of brown with a little bit of pink actually, and I'm on the left-hand side of that trunk adding a few strokes to suggest some more dimension and shadow. Continue to add those slightly more watery marks over top of your upside down umbrellas. I know I keep saying upside down umbrellas, but it's such a great way to describe the basic shape that really makes a weeping willow what a weeping willow is. And now I'm going in for the good stuff, my favorite part in most paintings, the liner brush. And I'm using the same greens and blues as I did earlier. This kind of detail on a cold pressed paper, you might notice you'll have to reload a liner brush often, but that's normal. And I'm just going in and defining some of the areas of those upside down umbrellas with a few thin and detailed strokes downwards. At this stage of the painting, I'm thinking back to the original strokes that I made with that dagger brush, and I'm kind of defining those original umbrellas. I'm wanting these sections to look like definitive sections. So as I add the detail with my liner brush or my round brush or whatever it is that you're using, you're bringing some definition back to those clusters that you lost during the second layer. I'm adding an additional cluster here on the right-hand side, and I'm doing it because I felt like it needed that for balance. These are the types of decisions that you're going to be making, that you might deviate from your original inspiration photo, and that's totally okay. I mean, let's face it, I'm constantly deviating from my inspiration photo. Sometimes I feel like it's just a prop. Head to comments, friends, because I gotta know, are you gonna paint with me? Comment painting along or will soon. And while you're at it, if you're having fun and getting some value from this video, would you give it a boop? That's a like, friends. Your likes give me all the warm and fuzzies, but they also help folks that are looking for this kind of content find it easier. I'm headed down back into the trunk with my liner brush to add some additional detail. I'm using that dark brown, I'm using some red mixed in, some pink, and just adding a few scratches, dots, and dashes in a few select areas to suggest the final moments of bark texture. And I just felt like this tree needed a little something, a little touch of sunshine. So I'm using peach on my number 2 round brush, and I'm adding a few strokes of peach here and there, a few dots, dashes, a few little scrubs, just to make it look like the sun is twinkling through all of these leaves. Now, you feel like you have a handle on trees, which means you're ready for a full landscape. So I'm going to send you over to this video next to give it a try. Until next time, friends, I wish you lots of happy painting.